and we are happy. I would be personally, on behalf of CII, happy to announce that for the year 2021, Sucharita Basu, partner Aquila, has been selected as the chairperson of the IWN West Bengal chapter, and Sujata Guin, who is the VP HR of Apijay Surendra Park Hotels Limited. She is our vice chairperson for the year. So I would like to invite Shucharita to please take over the session and to give your opening remarks and really start the first session of IWN for this year 2020-21. Over to you, Shucharita.
Are you am I audible? Very clearly audible?
You are audible.
So we all know, of course, this is a very these are very uncertain times and unprecedented times, very sad and somber year. But of course, the show must go on. As human beings, we adapt, we evolve, and we are also optimists. So, in the meantime, therefore, we thought that let us kickstart CIIW and West Bengal's year with this webinar, which we thought is a very relevant topic. We'll discuss about it a little more as we go on. I would like to, first of all, and very quickly and very briefly, want to introduce IWN to y'all, CIIWN to y'all, and I'll try and do that through a very small slideshow, and I'm trying to share the content. Just give me a minute. Housekeeping rule, as you know, please mute your mics when you all are not speaking, because these background noises, you know, it really comes in the way of very fruitful discussion. So the bell ringing is a good charm, I think, but it's coming in the way. We are so IWN is a chapter of CII, Confederation of Indian Industry, as we all know about Confederation of Indian Industry, and this is its 25th year. But IWN, it was launched in the year 2013, and the range of members and the demography of IWN is very niche, because we have aspiring as well as very accomplished career women as our membership platform. It is the platform for the membership of such career women. It is actually to promote women participation and growth leadership in the workspace. And YWN was thought of because it was felt that there's a need to have a structured platform for working women or women who want to enter the workforce, or if they have jumped out of the workforce for some reason, they want to make a comeback. So it is really a platform to discuss our issues, our hurdles, to create a supportive network. The vision of IWN is, of course, to create an ecosystem where we try to ensure and try to enable women to be financially independent and explore their full economic potential. So this is why I keep saying that IWN is a very niche organization and of CII for career women, and the mission is to grow it as much as possible so that we have more women participation who can come into the workforce, who can sustain in the workforce as well as become leaders. Now, it has a pan-India presence, and all the members of each and every IWN chapters, they are very accomplished women, and we can draw from each other's strengths. The key stakeholders of IWN are, of course, independent women professionals, doctors, academicians, professors, chartered accountants, lawyers. The women in industry, by industry, I mean the entire diaspora of industry. It could be manufacturing, it could be retail, it could be hospitality, or anything else, including services. Students who are about to pass out, and also leaders of the academic world are also a big pillar of IWN, as well as women entrepreneurs and women in family business. So these are the key stakeholders, and the membership generally comprises of these four categories, broad categories of working women. Just 1 minute. So the key focus areas for IWN are as follows. Metadata, as many of us know, metadata is data about data, which IWN and CI has the wherewithal to collect, and that data is utilized and analyzed to create data about the concerns faced by women, especially in the workforce, in the labor force, and try and resolve them gradually. Capacity building initiatives is another very important aspect of IWN, and in the West Bengal chapter also, capacity building and leadership growth is a very important agenda. We do have gender diagnostic tools which we share with corporates for them to analyze the situation in which they are in with respect to gender equity, gender equality, fluidity, etc. Entrepreneurship is encouraged by the IWN platform. Women in manufacturing and women in agriculture, these are the key areas of working women, that key sectors rather, where we want to focus, because my panelist Soumya Kapoor Mehta will speak more about it as to how women in manufacturing are much less than what it should be in our country. And on the contrary, women in agriculture are perhaps more, because India and especially Bengal has a robust rural economy, and that is comprised of the agri sector mostly. And of course, safe cities, for which we partner with the police and the municipal authorities. Services of IWN are mainly three. It is learning and development, and as I said, health and well-being and policy advocacy. Now, for learning and development, we have three categories of women. One is freshers, who are just coming out of their, after completing their education and want to enter the workforce. The middle management, which is a very critical category for us, because we want them to sustain in the workplace, and even if they have to sort of take a break, and how to help them come back. And the senior management. Health and well-being, definitely, because even for now, if I take the example of now as I speak, health and well-being for women, both working and maybe not working. Women are never not working, but not working in the labor force perhaps, have health and well-being issues, which we try to address, and to the extent we can in IWN. Now, policy advocacy is, of course, a major agenda of CII, because CII is one of the largest industry and commercial chambers of this country, and CII IWN as well, where we sort of discuss, deliberate, hold symposiums, and several surveys are conducted to discuss about issues which, for IWN, women face. And all these laws and policies which you finally see transpire, they of course don't come overnight. They come through all these workshops and surveys that are done. So policy advocacy is one of the major activity that CI and CIIWN does. So with all our researches, there are many more perhaps, but some of the issues which are faced by women at home, most of us here are working women, and we have faced all of this, and still facing, and will in future face, but our effort is to lessen the impact as much as possible, are some of these: engagement in the lowermost rungs, very scant percentage of women in the C-suite level, that is in the leadership level, unaccounted work in the national accounting process. This, I'm sure, Soumya, being an economist, will throw some light on with and substantiate it with numbers. Gender-based discrimination with respect to recruitment, pay, opportunities of career growth, which in the wake of COVID could become worse, which is our topic of discussion today. Combating work-life balance, sexual harassment, safety, and of course, very limited reporting on the issues that women still face at work. Now, about IWN West Bengal, this is the chapter which I am the chairperson of for 2021. It was founded in 2017. We have taken very baby steps till where we are now, and I'm very confident that with the support of CII and all our members, and the community at large, will be able to do much better and carry on with our agenda of capacity building, of increasing leadership capability, health and awareness. We do sessions on anti-sexual prevention of sexual harassment in workplace in collaboration with another NGO. And we have had some very beautiful events in the past, beautiful as well as impactful events in the past. One was breaking down boundaries. And here we concentrated on the gender gap that is created between the middle to senior management. And this is an agenda which we are going to carry forward this year. The new family structure because of being single parents by choice as well as circumstances. And here we did not just stop at single parents being women, but also men. And several other sessions where we discussed about health, of wellness, of posh and unstereotyped professions of women. We report several, two white papers were released. One is on gender diversity, and the other is on the curious case of missing women at the top. It was a collaborative study done by CII, by Aquila, which is my law firm, and ISB as well. There are some glimpses of the IW and West Bengal chapter events, some press releases. And the most important thing, and it is incumbent upon me as the new chairperson to tell you that what are our plans for 2021, because 2021 is a difficult year for us, but we have to make use of it fully so that, we don't lose out on the time. And maybe it's an opportunity also if it is thought of it that way, because now we are being able to sort of join in these webinars and deliberate more than what we could have mobilized ourselves if we were physically supposed to be joining. So, of course, there were 4 task forces which we want to form. We want to limit our agenda to 4 task forces. One is capacity building and leadership. This will have several subsets: membership, sponsorship, and social issues. Now, in social issues, IWN West Bengal has been a pioneer, one of the pioneers. Is that because we have incorporated the concept of social issues, which could range from domestic violence to single parenthood to inclusion of LGBTQ plus, and we want to continue with that. Empathy, CSR, fellowship, these are the call of the day, and we want to stress upon it for this year. We aim to take our membership to 100. We have about 60 very, very strong members in their own fields, and we want to take it to 100. And God willing, we'll have physical events around September and February. That is how we've planned it. And we want to incorporate this celebration of CII, which is its 125th year. So we have to celebrate hashtag CII at 125 in our events as well. We want to incorporate that. We plan to have several webinars like this till we can meet physically, and even thereafter. I think this is a very good way to save on several kinds of resources and time. And we can't avoid navigating through COVID-19 and its aftermath. So a couple of events, a series of events possibly around this topic. Fireside chats, knowledge sharing sessions. We want to hold leadership training sessions with corporates, for which we'll collaborate with the corporates, as well as CSR initiatives. Now, again, it is a very major task for me to ensure that the membership base of CIIW in West Bengal is increases with people like you who can contribute to it very effectively. And we look forward to your valuable contributions. Now, this is definitely an opportunity to utilize the CII platform, which again, I'm saying is one of the largest and the oldest commercial chambers in the country. And this is a platform where you get to interact with other members, other institutions, state and central governments. The access is much, much easier than it would have otherwise been. And there are several, you can see on the screen, networking is one of the more important aspects, and exploring business opportunities, exploring mutual ways to benefit each other. 30% of my clients are from CII. So I'm a living example of how we have been able to symbiotically use each other in CII. Now, of course, this is a very special day, and because we are going to discuss about a very special topic, and I don't want to hold you all for too long, but then I would urge you all to start considering to become part of IWN West Bengal. And you can contact Anuradha for that. And of course, I am always one WhatsApp away from any query, any suggestion that you may have, or even if I can be of any assistance to you. This is the membership fee structure, which is very, very nominal. It's about 4,000 rupees per year. And this is one slide which we have to include, which is why I have. And therefore, stay safe. Thank you very much. And I will answer all your queries about CIIWN if you have any offline. Today, I will like to quickly set the theme for today's discussion because all of us have joined for that purpose. And though it may sound a little distant and unreal when you hear it first, that how will COVID-19 impact women differently from the way it could impact men, because all of us are suffering, entire humankind is suffering. But let me tell you, it is true. And the earlier we wake up to realize it, the better. So while we were reading several reports, news, and global white papers, etc., which are being released, we thought that in consonance with the mission of IWN, it is important for us to share with us, with our members, this concern and try to together evolve some solutions to it. Because like I said, policy advocacy is an important aspect of CII. So perhaps we can collect from here and try to incorporate it in the bigger macro picture of India Inc. So I'm very thankful to all the panelists and all the attendees who have realized and appreciated the concern which is looming large over us today on the topic of this webinar and have joined us. I would expect a very, very interactive session. I will now leave the floor to our Vice Chairperson Sujata, who shall be moderating the discussions and the interactions. And I hope you have a very good time with us. Thank you so much. Over to you, Sujata.
Thank you, Sharita. Good afternoon, everyone. And once again, thank you all for being with us today. Taking off from Shucharita's introduction for today's webinar, as it is very evident that the COVID-19 pandemic has and is creating devastation across the globe. And as the United Nations has already sounded out, that it is the women across the world who's going to be more adversely and more hard hit when compared to men. So our discussion point today will examine the various aspects of this grim situation, more so pertaining to women's employment, financial implications, and similar topics. I will start the session by introducing our esteemed panelists. We have with us Ms. Soumya Kapoor Mehta, who is an economist and heads the initiative for What Works and to advance women and girls in the economy. It is a non-profit organization that works towards women's economic empowerment and is supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We also have with us Ms. Monidhi, a face and voice that I think we all identify with. She is a renowned journalist and is resident editor at NDTV. I can see Monideepa on the screen. Hi. We are also very fortunate to have with us an extended panel of very important policymakers, office bearers of government, and various corporates representing different industrial segments. So I would like to welcome Ms. Patricia Hoffman, Consul General of the United States of America. I would also like to welcome on board Ms. Rakhi Basu, Transport Specialist at the World Bank. We were expecting Ms. Chotan Lama, who is the Secretary of the Panchayat and Rural Development Department, but I think she's been called for official duty, and so she would have had to miss this. Also expected was Ms. Priyanka Kapoor, Deputy Commissioner Income Tax, who also has not been able to join us so far, and Mr. Rajan Veer Kapoor Singh, IAS MD West Bengal Transport Corporation, who's expected to join us soon. From the corporate segment, we have Ms. Shoma Basu of HSBC, Kasturi Ghatak from Intweri, Srila Das Mistra from TCS, and many, many others representing industry. So once again, thank you for being on this forum. And I will now request Soumya to present her views and thoughts on this very grim topic. Soumya, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sujata. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, there seems to be an echo, but I'll try my best. Okay. So when I was actually asked to do this, thank you, Sucharita, for inviting me to do this. IWage, or the Initiative for What Works to Advance Women and Girls in the Economy, our agenda is basically to deepen evidence on the issues that matter to women, and particularly women's work in the specific context of India. And so when Sucharita, who's a very dear friend, requested me, if I could probably present some data and insights on women's work in India, and moreover, how COVID may potentially impact it. I love the idea, and I hope to be able to do justice to it. So thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation. When somebody asks a gender research center like us, what is the impact of COVID on women's work? And the first and the shortest answer one can give is, of course, there's a disproportionate impact, more so than men. But then what is the evidence that leads to that? But before I actually go on to discussing the potential impact on COVID on women's work in India, when I was chatting with Sujata and with Sucharita and Anuradha, it seemed that it was probably topical to also present what are the trends that one sees in women's work. What sectors are they concentrated in? How many women work in rural and urban India? And when you actually see the data, the number of women who actually work are very few in India compared to other countries, developing countries of India's GDP level. So let me start with the presentation. I'll try and share my screen first with you. 1 second. I hope this is visible to everyone. So the structure of my presentation or talk is as follows. I'll first give the audience a little bit of data on the extent to which women participate in the labor force in India. The second half of the presentation will briefly go over what may be the potential impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on India's female workforce, and then some recommendations which are emerging both in the rural and the urban space on, how can we contain the damage that may be done, particularly to the female workforce. So if you look at this graph, basically the lower two lines, which are green in color, the light green and the dark green lines, are actually the extent to which women participate in labor force in India. And the light green line is really showing the participation of women in the workforce, in the labor force in rural areas. And if you see the last 2 points in time, there has been a steep decline amongst the women who work in rural areas. So whereas 35.8%, roughly 36% of women who were able-bodied and were above the age of 18 years, 36% were working in rural areas in 2011-12. By 2017-18, it has already declined to about 25%. That's an 11 percentage point decline in rural areas. And traditionally, India has had higher labor force participation rates for women in rural areas. You see more women working in agriculture, on the farms, in off-farm enterprises, in the non-farm sector as well in rural areas than you see in urban areas. Urban areas has traditionally been very low, and if you can see the lower line, it's almost stagnant at 19-20% for since 2009-10. But of course, if you compare it to men's labor force participation rates, it's significantly lower, almost 1/4. If you see if you see the two graphs above. I think something happened. 1 second. Just 1 second, I'll try again. Okay. And if you look at the female labor force participation rates in Indian cities, they're even lower. So actually, you think that many women are working in metropolitan cities like Delhi and Kolkata and Chennai. But if you see, the rates that are visible on the screen to you, it's just about, 10-12% in cities like Kolkata and Delhi. What is more surprising is that if you look at the industrial centers like Faridabad and Ghaziabad, usually you would see scores of women actually going and working in industries in these industrial belts like Faridabad and Ghaziabad, or even in Rajkot. But the labor force participation rates are extremely low at about 5-6%. Now, what does this tell us? One is, of course, a measurement issue, which a lot of economists like us grapple with, and that is that a lot of women actually do part-time work. And therefore, part-time work doesn't tend to get captured in these labor force statistics, but part-time work is more suitable to women because they also have to look after their domestic and household responsibilities. So they don't want to devote, 8 hours or 10 hours at work every time. Now, are these women who are working in factories like Faridabad and Ghaziabad, but doing some part-time work as maids or cleaners, clearly are they being captured or not? So there's a big cloud over the way the National Sample Survey, which comes under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation for Government in India, which actually reports these statistics. There's a big cloud on how you measure these statistics, and which is why this graph came in for a lot of criticism, when you said that only 7% of women are participating in the labor force in even cities or industrial centers like Faridabad and Ghaziabad. What is the composition? Which sectors are these women who are working? So if 20% of women are working in urban areas, about 25% are working in rural areas, which sectors are they concentrated in? And if you look at rural areas, which are the first two columns on the left-hand side, and you see the shift between 2011-12 and 2017-18, the light blue one, which is the turquoise sort of light blue, are actually women who work as unpaid helpers. So it's not as if women are working and also getting paid. A significant proportion, nearly 2 in every 5 women who are working in rural areas are actually working as unpaid workers on family farms. And another 30% are engaged in casual work. So these are basically the dihari laborers, the daily wage workers. If you look at urban areas, there's a slight rise in the share of salaried workers. This is the deeper sort of teal blue that you can see between 2011-12 and 2017-18. There is a rise from 43% of the female workers who work in urban areas, about 43% regular wage workers or regular salaried workers. They have increased to about 52%. But is that good news or bad news? I mean, at our end, in iWage, we have even done, and which I haven't shown in this particular slide, but we have even done a deeper disaggregation of who are these regular salaried workers, and do they work within the confines of the labor acts that have been promulgated by the government. And most of these workers are actually working in small MSMEs, which are not as regulated, and therefore they are not basically getting maternity benefits or any provident fund or any pension. They are, in a way, informal workers, what you call them. So they do get a regular salary every month, which is very minuscule, but a large majority of even these 52% are really in the so-called informal workforce. But if you look at salaried jobs, just an interesting statistic is that even now, 80% of all salaried jobs in India are still held by men. And if you look at, this is also not there in this particular slide, but if you, as Sucharita was saying, if you look at the disaggregation between women who are salaried workers, whether they are working in services or in the manufacturing sector, 55% of them are in services. And this has huge implications for what happens in a post-COVID context, which I'll return to later in the course of my presentation. This is just to indicate to you what I was saying, that a large proportion of women in India, even though they do get regular wages or a salary every month, are really doing informal work. And the percentage of women in informal employment is very high in India, it's about 70%. Some surveys, which are done by organizations like SEVA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, put it at even higher, at about 80%. So really, I mean, are the women who are deriving regular salaries, are they even in the formal sector, is a big question mark. So Charita and Sujata also asked me to dwell a little bit about the female and male earning gap, and how that's going to probably increase or decrease, or even remain the same in a post-COVID context. And if you look at, the self-employed sort of men and women, women earn very less compared to men. So this is just the female to male ratio. And basically women are getting 37% of, what a male self-employed, worker or self-employed person who's running an enterprise would be getting in rural areas. And, in urban areas, they're just earning 1/3. So even though, we keep saying that, let's probably promote things like the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana. There are lots of women who are there in the MSME space, but even if you have women who are self-employed, relative to men, they're just earning about 1/3. Where you have some sort of equality are schemes like Narega. So, women and men, I mean, I was in fact a little surprised, when our research associates came up with 0.94, because I would have expected a 1:1, ratio, because, as per the Act, men and women should be paid equally. In casual workforce also, they're just getting 60% of what a Dihadi male laborer would be getting. And even in the regular salary jobs, they're getting about, in urban areas, slightly better. They earn about 70% of men do, but there's still that glass ceiling that you're not able to shatter. You're not able to earn as much as a man who would have similar skills and who would be in the same post. If you look at the median daily earnings, and this is the average for India. So I just wanted to show this graph that, although we are working women, we are very privileged that we manage to earn much more than what an average female worker would in India. And if you just even look at the regular salaried employed, and if you look at the female for urban, it's just about 267 rupees per day. This is 2017-18 data. So clearly it's not very high. And the average Indian woman worker, even in, urban India, is just about getting about 250 rupees per day, even if she earns regular wages or regular salaries. Now I'm just going to shift to the second part of the presentation, which is what may be the potential impacts of COVID. If you look at the mortality rate, interestingly, I mean, one of, because I've been a part of a few webinars, and one of the male economists said that, well, women are not dying at least as much as men, which is true, because the mortality rates for women, fortunately, in the pandemic is much lower if you look at the data that's coming out from the US and particularly China. And that has been attributed to women being the hardier sex, and also not smoking as much, or whatever reason. But there are many adverse impacts which are also gradually becoming visible. The first is that a lot of the women who are, a lot of the health staff that is working on the front line, a majority of them actually are women. So globally, that average is about 55 to 60%. In India, that a female to male ratio in the health workers is actually 85%. It's very high. So, nurses outnumber doctors, and that's been a problem with the way, we've also been able to get, our medical colleges to turn out doctors in India. The second is that there is, as a lot of us are experiencing strangely for the first time in urban India, and even though we are very privileged, is that we are actually, even working women are now spending a lot of time on unpaid domestic work, cooking, cleaning, home care, looking after the children. I have a child who's in nursery, and you have to take care of their home homeschooling. These are things that we had never anticipated earlier. And this is a post-COVID context. If you look at a pre-COVID context, Indian women actually spend about 6 hours per day on unpaid domestic work. That's about 360 minutes compared to 36 minutes spent by men. And I'm just going to flash that graph for you. And actually the female to male ratio of time spent on unpaid, it's unpaid because, you don't get a payment for it if you're putting in work in your own household. The female to male ratio of number of hours spent on domestic work is actually 10 times. It's 9.8, and India is the highest in the world. So this is set to increase. This is 2014 data. So clearly this is set to increase now in a pre-COVID, post-COVID context. The increased burden may also mean more women dropping out of the labor force because, there is, when you have a domestic priority, then it means that the man probably has to become the main breadwinner. There are a lot of reports around increased risk of domestic violence and anxiety. So there was one data set that was recently released by the National Commission of Women in India, and there has been a twofold rise in calls reporting domestic abuse just between early March and end March, so last month. So clearly there are tensions are brewing, the men are unemployed, they're sitting at home, there is no income, and that is coming out in women. And we have also been doing phone surveys in Delhi with some of our, research. We have databases. We've been tracking female factory workers, and women are actually much more anxious than even men on what's going to happen. And when will the work reopen? When will the lockdown open? When will my husband be back at work? There is also a chance that men will replace women in work, and that's more likely in rural areas. All of us have seen these images of many migrant laborers, taking that arduous journey back home, walking on foot. It's unlikely that they will return very soon to the cities to work because of the experience that they have had, and which means that they will be in rural areas, and which means that work opportunities will have to be created more so in rural areas, which is what a lot of economists like Martha Sen or Abhijit Banerjee are referring to. They're talking about opening Narega work sites and other things to absorb this labor force that's returning home. And this is, an interesting statistic that I had put out just to say that, there are surveys like the World Values Survey, which is the same question that's asked across the world, South Asia, other continents, on if work opportunities were available, who should it go to? Should it go to the man or should it go to the woman? And about half of Indians agree that, it should actually, when job opportunities are scarce, it should go to the men, and that's much higher than the world average. In fact, the other 20, the 100% is just made up by 25% even refraining to give an opinion. Interestingly, more women than men believe that actually it should go to the men, because they've been taught, the social norms have been such, they've been taught to believe that, once, if there are only 2 jobs available instead of 10, it's better that the man actually brings home an income. There are going to be, IWH has several projects with non-farm enterprises, both in urban and in rural areas. And we are hearing that women-led businesses, which usually used to be very small businesses like beauty parlors and salon shops, etc., and kirana stores, they are going to go under. And if they have borrowed, they may not be able to repay their debt. And there's also a lot of these MSMEs, particularly in the metropolitan cities, were in the past 3 or 4 years were interestingly shifting to the gig economy. So you had platforms like Urban Clap offering them opportunities, that instead of setting up like a beauty salon, I can actually go door to door and deliver my services. Now that's apparently going to take a hit because people will not be will be scared actually ordering beautician services at home. And beautician services make up about 70% of all Urban Clap services. I'm just giving an example of one platform that's done. Ola and Uber are also estimating their sales coming down because people will not be using it as much, for hygiene reasons. Of course, Ola and Uber don't employ as many women as compared to men. There are also going to be adverse impacts on regular wage employment. Employers, and we have done studies in the past where if you look at the demand side of the labor market in urban India, they prefer to hire men for the reasons that they can work long hours, you can send them for travel, at the last minute. And that preference may actually increase in a post-COVID context. And with a likely higher proportion of men in these salaried jobs, then the wage gaps that I showed you earlier will also increase. There are also adverse impacts which may be felt on human capital because, now in rural areas, from whatever we are talking, we have a big project with self-help groups and the NRLM, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, which comes under MORD. And there's a huge stress to actually shift children away from schools because the schools are closed and people parents are feeling, why should I even pay the tuition fee? And usually then the first person to drop out is actually the girls, much more likely than boys. There's also some reduced expenditure on women's health and sanitation needs because, assuming there've been multiple stories about, pregnant women probably not getting the care that they need because the hospitals are overcrowded. They are in fact turning away patients because, they have to focus on the quarantine facilities for COVID patients. And then very high unemployment rates for women are anticipated. And what is unemployment? Unemployment means, I pass out of college, an engineering college as a girl, and I want to work, but I'm not getting the job that I like. Usually that is always higher for women because, women are also, girls are also bound by norms that, the parents will say work in the same city, do not, it should be reasonable office hours. So you will not get the kind of work that you usually like as compared to men who would be open to taking up any and every job. So if you look at the CMI data, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, between Feb and March, and this was something that was all over the press, that the unemployment rate in India has increased to 23% in March. Just to give you, we don't have the gender disaggregated figures for March, but in February, while the unemployment rate was 7%, it was 6% for men and it was 18% for women. So always unemployment rates in India have been traditionally higher for women, and we don't know in March and April, of course, they may hit the roof. Now, I'm just going to close with a few recommendations that are coming across, sociologists and industrialists, and what may need to be done, particularly, if we were to salvage the situation from the point of view of women's work. The first is in urban areas, a large majority are actually working in self-employment and in medium to small scale enterprises. They make up about 20% of all units in India. The first sort of recommendation that seems to be coming is that offer them a moratorium on interest rates for a year, make their loans repayable over a longer duration, reduce the interest rate on that loan as well, and moreover, extend credit lines for working capital, because these enterprises, most importantly, are suffering a huge liquidity crunch because incomes have dried in the lockdown phase for about 2 months. The working capital cash credit loans can also be extended. The Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana has a lot of women-led MSMEs who buy. It's a cash credit line that's, loans that are given to women-led MSMEs. You could even think of extending working capital cash credit lines, to the existing Mudra loan borrowers with the state or the government of India or state government or whoever the powers be, providing a default guarantee cover. One could also think of wage subsidy schemes to all MSMEs where the female staff is greater than 50%. For the women in salaried employment in urban areas, we don't have the statistics from India as yet, but in the US, just to give you an example, between March and April, about 700,000 layoffs have been estimated, of which 60% are women. And the most affected are actually younger women. And the reason they're more affected is because, they don't have the sort of experience to be in the job market. So, when it comes to layoffs, you would try and fire the younger women because, you would still keep the more experienced staff with you. Now, this is something that all industrialists are talking about, that, the sectors that are going to be most adversely affected with the pandemic are tourism, hospitality, and aviation. It's very unlikely for people to travel anytime soon. It's very unlikely for them to use hotels for leisure anytime soon, and very likely to take leisurely trips, too. So tourism, hospitality, and aviation would be affected. And the statistic that Sucharita was mentioning earlier, and which I was referring to, that a majority of women who are salaried workers in urban India are actually in the service sector. And these are the sort of service sectors that they are concentrated in. So once these sectors actually go under and, they go in the red, we expect a lot of staff being fired. And since a large majority of them may be women, they are like air hostesses or cleaners in hotels or waitresses, they're likely to suffer. But at the same time, even though the jobs created after a crisis, may target men, and, men may probably be preferred for such jobs, the one big thing that urban corporates have been talking about is that women have traditionally been comfortable working from home. Why can't we make work from home an opportunity for them? And why can't we outsource jobs that we do, even, chartered accountancy or any of these professional services, and need not make it compulsory for them to actually go to an office and attend office. So that may be something that may turn out to be an opportunity. And then women in the gig economy. iWage has been in touch with lots of gig players who actually now want to connect to the Kirana stores, because the problem is that the Kirana stores are out in one pocket or one residential colony. How do you get them connected to an Amazon, which seems to be now the only sort of way, or a big basket, which seems to be the only way to which they are delivering their commodities. But at the same time, the government of India needs to, or the state governments need to also come up with a social security sort of mechanism for women in the gig economy, because we have done studies with platforms like Urban Clap and others, and you can use the platform, you can go and, do a job for a beautician service in one particular, to one particular customer, but you don't get any provident fund or any maternity benefit. And, how do you bring these gig platforms in a sort of, and I think they're open to it. There have been conversations that they've been having with the World Bank on actually having social protection schemes now on offer for women, because increasingly that may be the one service that women may have to connect to. In rural areas, again, MSMEs may go under. It's the same sort of recommendations. For the regular wage employment, as I said, employers prefer to hire men. And with the likely higher proportion of men in salaried jobs. Sorry, I think. Yes, this is in rural areas. For women in casual work, one of the recommendations is that the government of India increases its fund allocation, opens up more work sites under NREGA. Very few, although a large majority of women, as I said, are working as frontline, workers, health workers, and teachers. There are huge vacancies. So if you were to look at even just the vacancy data for ASHA workers, for ANMs, the auxiliary nurse and midwives who are working in the National Health Mission, or even the teachers, they're huge vacancies. Can we fill these vacancies to create job opportunities in rural areas for women? And moreover, can we convert some workers like the ASHA workers who are just a cadre-based worker to more regular employment and increase their incentives? Finally, for women in agriculture, what we are hearing from MORD and other state level departments is that we need to start thinking of involving women in off-farm agro-processing activities, because the past 2 months of the lockdown have shown and is that food sufficiency is a huge problem in rural areas, which means that women can be involved in providing, running community kitchens or even cultivating kitchen gardens. That's something that the state of Chhattisgarh is doing very actively, and in all our conversations amongst some of the states that we are involved with, Chhattisgarh did not have have a problem of food sufficiency because the vegetables were right in your backyard. And you were just not relying completely on the free rice being distributed through the PM relief schemes. Finally, make SHGs, the self-help groups of women, as engines of revitalizing rural economies. Kudumbashree has been doing that in Kerala. A lot of the migrant relief work that we are seeing in the state of Kerala is actually being run by Kudumbashree. They are running the community kitchens, for migrant workers coming in from Jharkhand, from Bihar, from Bengal. And they're also running rural non-farm home-based businesses. This is actually the largest sector for women-led ventures in India. We need to think about revitalizing them and offering them, some relief on interest and their loans as well. So I'll end there and hope this has been a little informative for you.
Thank you so much, Soumya. Your presentation is not only informative, it's been a real wake-up call, I think. When you think about the biases that exist still in the labor market, the pay gaps for women that we've talked about, the threats to employment, the threat to wages, and let's not forget the increased incidence of domestic violence. It sort of takes me back to a statement which was made by the World Economic Forum that stated that and this is, I'm talking about pre-COVID days, when it says that it'll take us almost 2 centuries to truly achieve a certain real level of gender equality. So on this note, I will head over to Ms. Monadeepa Banerjee and request you to share your viewpoints, your observations from not only the media perspective, but more so because you are often at ground zero. You are, interacting and meeting women and men from different backgrounds, different stratas, whether it is financial, social, and different situations. So what are your thoughts on this very difficult scenario? To you, Monadeepa. To unmute yourself.
Are you there? Yeah.
Yes,
Hello?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
I don't know why. I just have a blank screen in front of me, but doesn't matter. It feels easier to talk, I think. But first of all, thank you so much for having me on this program. And it's been an eye-opener, really, already in the first 1 hour of on the discussion. And Soumya, I want to request you to please put your a presentation down in hard copy and mail it to me if possible, because it was source of 15 different reports that I could follow up on. I really don't have so much depth to offer, and you're right. I mean, I'm more of a I can sort of tell you a story rather than facts and figures. Yeah, in fact, sometimes they're not even facts, they're just perceptions. And let me just start off, and I'll keep it brief because I also got to run. It's 1 o'clock. Okay, now, on a TEDx talk, I heard this wonderful exposition on something we don't talk about in our drawing rooms, and that is shit. So what happened is the other day I was at Shobhabajar metro station. There is a colony of pavement dwellers there, and I met Rinki Pramanik and Minu Das and several other women. You there? Hello?
Yes.
So going back to Shobhabajar metro station, Pinky Pramanik, Minu Das, and lots of other young children who were present on that pavement living there. They've been living there forever, and now the circumstances are so difficult. One of the most curious problems that they presented to me was the fact that they earn daily wages normally. They earn money every day doing daily wage work. And suddenly they have no source of daily income. So the big question before them is, how do they pay to use a municipal public toilet that is there in the area? It is maintained by the municipality, but if you have to go to the toilet at 3 rupees or 2 rupees every time you want to go, they don't have the money for that. I mean, it was an astonishing thing. And this was not something that one woman told me or two, but multiple men and women presented this problem, that they cannot go to a public toilet at this time because they don't have the money to pay to go in. And don't forget, it's not just one of them, but entire families. So, you know, if your expenses could mount to 25 rupees, 30 rupees, 40 rupees a day, and they don't have the money to spare. So that is one of the shocking realities I, confronted on the ground in Kolkata, in the same city where I live. I couldn't imagine. But the curious thing was, when I asked them whether they could request their councillor or the municipal authorities to make that free, make the facility free, they all said, no, 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 we want it to be paid because it stays clean that way.
Having to match the same price for return, we can wait until late May to buy the tickets. If things look more normal, the prices will be much higher, especially because December, early
Everyone,
Jan,
please mute yourself.
it is low season price and the
Speaker,
usual
there's
price
somebody
is obviously
speaking.
900. এটা কিন্তু ঠিক কথা।
So that should give you an extent of the problem that women and men are facing and children are facing out there in this horrible post-COVID situation that we are seeing. And I cannot even begin to imagine how it must be in the rural areas, in homes, in cities where domestic violence, as Soumya so eloquently put it, is rising, the number of calls doubling. That's something that's confirmed locally here in Kolkata as well, that in Bengal too, they have been receiving more calls in women's helplines for help with domestic violence. Even child abuse has become a problem. Child pornography, apparently, according to Professor Satyarthi, who was speaking on our channel the other day, he said that too is going up. And of course, women are working not just double duty, but triple duty now, caring for the older people, caring for children. I mean, out there on the pavement, it was the women who were running around, bathing the children, cooking the food, and, trying to sort of keep the life running. And men, I'm sorry, were just lounging around, and that was hugely, it was very stark. You could see it on one side of the pavement. The men were hanging around, talking, gossiping, and the women were hard at work, minding the children, cooking the food. And they all live, of course, under plastic sheets. There was one exception, one man who was cooking, but the rest, no. The other issue, of course, is as Soumya mentioned, women are working in huge numbers in the informal sector, domestic help. In the city, that's what you see. Lots of women who work in the domestic health sector, they are either going without pay or have been told they'll get half their salary in this COVID-19 times, or they will get no salary at all. There have been women, even in where I live, in Salt Lake, even there, apparently, there's a resistance to paying for domestic help who are off work at this particular time. Self-help groups could be the way forward, again, as Soumya said, but what happens when self-employment opportunities just, fall through the cracks? There are going to be so many fewer self-employment opportunities for women. It is of great concern. For instance, the tailor who lives in the local area, what kind of work will she get when people are not stepping out, people are not spending money on anything that is non-essential? So that is another area of concern, though government officers say that they are trying to focus on, helping women's self-help groups, a very strong movement here in Bengal. They're trying to ensure that they become, these self-help groups become a source of employment, of work, of earning, but honestly, I don't think they're very hopeful either. There's also issues of mental health that women groups are talking about. I know here in Kolkata that's becoming a huge issue, also related, of course, to domestic violence. There is another issue that Soumya mentioned, and I will sort of take it on that. Employability of women, is it going to fall when somehow things return to some kind of normalcy? There's already a problem because I know that I was working on a report some time ago that younger women who are fertile, who could be having a baby, as it is, they are getting fewer jobs. They are not top picks in in employment agencies or hiring firms because there's always the chance that they'll get married, have children, get pregnant, take maternity leave. All that has already made the employment that has already become a problem. Urban women are younger urban women who are possibly childbearing. They are already having a problem getting work, and the kind of work they want. The other issue, again, honestly, Soumya has covered so much. The other issue is, and I'd love all of you to discuss it. I was reading a report in which it said men do more work that can be done from home. That was one report. And that women, can't be domestic help or can't be a beauty parlor person sitting at home. So more women need to go out to work. And therefore, the work from home future that we are all looking at, that will incline and favor and be advantageous to men. That was one report I read. And the other one was a little contradictory. It said that in 2008, during the recession, the men got hit very badly, worse than the women, because men were working in heavy industries, manufacturing plants, and that's where all the shutdowns started happening in 2008. So it was the men who lost their jobs in larger numbers. Whereas women were luckier, mostly in the informal sector. They didn't lose work as much as the men did. So these are two contradictory kind of reports that I was reading before coming and joining you guys. And I would love all of you to sort of try and figure out which one is more accurate, or what's going to really happen at the end of the pandemic, or at least when things return to some kind of normalcy. I can also tell you from personal experience and speaking to other reporters, journalists across the country, women journalists, and there are a huge number of them in television at least, are having extremely challenging times, same as every other women in work sectors, formal sectors or informal sectors. It is having to manage the house, care for children, care for elderly people, and then also do their job. Work from home at a time like this for a journalist is anyway very difficult. They have to step out to really get ground reports. And at a time like this, having to multitask is something that every female woman television journalist at least is having to grapple with. It's tough times. Salary cuts are being announced across the board in the media, in other jobs. Everybody sort of keeping their fingers crossed and hoping it'll not be completely devastating. That's also a huge concern. And don't forget, single women, single mothers, a lot of them in the media are really, really having a difficult time. And I'm sorry, I think I just might have to end over here, and I'll come back and join you guys as the discussion progresses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Banerjee. Thank you. So as we see that, we've talked about a whole lot of issues, there are enough problems. And I think the need of the hour now is actually solutions. What and how do we that women are not further marginalized in these already painful times? We are in the midst of a brutal recession, as the IMF says, that it is going to be a recession like no other. So it's really tough times ahead. So what are the measures needed that would help build and maintain a women inclusive economic recovery plan? So whether it is at the government level, whether it is at corporate, whether it is through social interventions. I will now like to open up this discussion to all our extended panelists, to our the audience from from representing different industry. If I may, I will start by requesting Ms. Patricia Hoffman, Consul General of the United States of America, if she would like to say a few words on this. Ms. Hoffman?
Yes, hello, everybody. Thank you for this very informative session and for inviting me. And I think some of my consulate colleagues are also on the line. It is really uncharted territory that we're in these times. It's in many ways early days, but I'm glad we are starting the conversation to think about the impact. We at the consulate, we have always done a number of different types of programs that are related to gender, women's empowerment, and gender equality. Whether it's encouraging women in the STEM field or just women entrepreneurs, or looking at trafficking in persons and how that adversely and disproportionately impacts women as well. And so I think for us, we'll need to think about how we transition to some of these new economic and other social impacts that the two panelists that we're just talking about, and how we might be able to partner with CII and others to mitigate some of these types of situations and some of these types of adverse impacts. And so for us, we're sort of just in the early stages, and this has been a very helpful conversation to put a framework on how it is disproportionately impacting women. I just want to thank you for all of that. And it does also, it's nice to connect, because I think for me personally, the social connections here in Kolkata is something that I've really been missing during this lockdown period, and very glad to have the opportunity to see a lot of familiar faces and engage in this manner, and look forward to being able to engage in person again at an appropriate time at the American Center and at your facilities as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. May I request Ms. Rakhi Basu, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, and thank you so much for having me in this discussion. It's a very, very timely initiative. What the World Bank is doing and what we are seeing is a triggering of a social protection response to COVID-19. India has relied on in-kind support and cash transfers through its various schemes and platforms. And we are working very closely with the government on both improving as well as expanding its social protection system. So these includes measures such as extending social protection to informal workers, and a disproportionate number of which include women, introducing measures to alleviate tax burdens on women-owned businesses. We are also looking at direct benefit transfer to women, so put the cash in women's hand, and that makes a huge difference. And you will be rest assured that if the women receive the cash, the money is going to be spent on much more for the household, rather than when it goes to men, we see the money is being spent for their own expenses. For women who are in salaried position, things like allowing workers to withdraw from their provident fund, a non-refundable advance could be very useful. We are also talking to the government to have them pay special attention to the role of women who are frontline health workers. So just giving you, an example, PPEs are found not to be of an appropriate size for women. So it has been found that masks were just one sized. And using the default man size, often used in design, leave women much more vulnerable and exposed. So small things like that needs to be changed. Now, a couple of, an interesting fact on West Bengal is that in West Bengal, we have seen that there has been a disproportionate lower labor force participation for women compared to the rest of India. So Bengal has this twin problem of high aging population and lower women in the labor force. So in states like this, which are already had this issue of not having enough women in the labor force, I think one has to look at a very curated approach as to what can be done to remove some of the barriers. So these are the social protection is definitely something that the government is using right now, which is an immediate and short term. But I think in the long run, one has to start looking at the future of jobs. What does the future of job look like? And what we have been talking about disruptive technology. This is a disruption, a global disruption. And the nature of jobs have that's going to happen has changed drastically. So areas like ed tech, which has been highly gendered, could be areas where we can get more women to start participating, and how do corporates and others can start working on skilling would be something that needs to be rethought. So I'll stop here, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Basu. I will request Mr. Rajan Veer Kapoor Singh, if you would like to, share a few thoughts.
Well, I think most of the things have been covered by the fellow colleagues here in this webinar. But I somehow feel that the biggest problem that we are facing is not about report. It's not about the crisis of 2009 or the current crisis. I think the biggest problem lies in our own families. Because I want to see, out of the 109 participants today in this seminar, how many women are bothered about what is going to be the lunch in half an hour. So in spite of being in the top echelons of society where you are discussing about the macro problems, if it is the woman only who has to think of the vegetables and the fish and the rice that has to be cooked 1 hour later, even if they have domestic help, that answers the problem for us. And for us as a country, India, I would say, we are going through a unique transition phase where our previous generation, the women were at home most of the time. So my mother used to be at home, whereas my wife works. And a lot of times the male ego cannot take this in a normal way, because you will compare, okay, my wife is not cooking food properly for me. My mother used to cook 4 dishes for me or get it cooked from the helps. And the same way, if the girl is unmarried, the parents would have expectations from her that she got to learn cooking, that she got to learn the feminine things, the so-called feminine things, because she's got to get married. And if she's a married woman, then the in-laws and the husband and even her own parents will put stress on her. That wonderful, you're an advocate, excellent, you're an IS officer. But darling, your roti is not as circle or as round as your mother's. So you don't fit it in the bill of being a perfect woman. So I am not talking about the informal sector where problems have been discussed. I'm not talking about the white collar jobs where problems have been discussed. I'm talking about everybody who is around, say all the 110 participants here. How many, I would say, my friends would really bother about the food? And one big impact psychologically, I feel, of this lockdown, which nobody has shared so far, and it might come across as a very funny thing, is that we're getting so pampered and used to all the dishes and the taken care of by the mother and the wife and the sister, that a lot of these people will not allow these women to work after the lockdown is over. In all these houses where people have a lot of money, they will say, darling, why do you need to work? We had such a lovely time in the lockdown. You used to get my chingdi malai kadi made. I can afford you to stay at home. Why do you need to work? Now, this is another, I think, thing that is going to happen at a level And I can see a lot of ladies are leaving the meeting from the last 1 hour. And I wonder how many of them are actually preparing their lunch. So I would just say that till the time we change this mentality that the household chores are only to be done by the woman, we cannot go anywhere, whether it is West or it is East, it's upper class or lower class. Till the time, thank you, Shahida. My point is, till the time the men, the women, and even men are not that bad. It's not always the husband who's the villain. You know, many times it is the mother of the girl. A lot of times it's the mother-in-law. A lot of times it's the real sister of the girl who creates the problem. So till the time we as a community understand that taking care of the house is the role of everybody and not just the woman of the house, we are not going anywhere. That is the only point I make, a very limited point, that all of us are stakeholders in this. Until the time we change this, nothing is going to change anywhere in the world. I have a sister in London I was talking to in the morning. She has 4 children. She's crying because she's an investment banker. Now she's at home and she has to just make food for the 4 kids. My wife says this is a punishment. She's an income tax deputy commissioner, and she says I'm working from home and I'm working for home. It's a double whammy. I'm actually available to my boss on the phone also, and I have to also ensure you get your paranthas and your fruit platters, and I also have to ensure that everybody gets tea on time. So I think till the time all of us really change from the inside, it's going to be a lip service, and that's my limited point. Thank you so much.
Very refreshing, I must say, very refreshing thoughts and very frank thoughts. And I think we're all with you on this. So thank you, Mr. Singh, for your shares. I will now head over to our, many of our women participants from industry. We have with us, Shoma from HSBC. We have Priya Banerjee. We've got Srila from TCS. So I will request you all to, just for a few minutes each, if you could just, share something on this.
So I'll just quickly, sort of echo Mr. Singh's thoughts. I was just thinking about that when, he rightly pointed out the right, perspective to the biases and the blind spots that we actually deal with on a regular basis. I'm actually in the legal space in the corporate sector for the last 10 years now, working locally and in the global sector. The problem basically comes down to the blind spots and the biases that we have and that we create, right? Going back, whether is the constitutional privileges, whether it is the legal buffer that we have in terms of Equal and Remuneration Act, it's all been there, right? In fact, interestingly, March 31st was Equal Pay Day for us, right? But those challenges we've been dealing with for a very long time now. Women have been largely getting paid less than men. And right now, in the post-COVID phase, when we are going to be coming out of it, I think the challenges are going to be manifold in this space because, one thought that perhaps, you could all even think, and what has been coming in my mind as well is, women are of course going to be having more job cuts and pay cuts. Like also we heard Soumya on the data points, women are going to be facing a lot of job cuts, much more as opposed to men, right? In that circumstances, when you are going to be rehiring women, what is the package that is actually going to be given to women as opposed to men? Also, another converse picture would be, most of these industries, and strangely, I was speaking to a very highly educated, I wouldn't like to name the person, very strong industrialist, and he actually gave me a very different perspective that, I would perhaps think of employing women probably because I would be looking at cost optimization. I'll be looking at cost cutting, because then the focus would be to, perhaps take a woman employee who has an equal talent in the same job title, in the same position, and pay less than a man. So that is something also which we would be grappling going forward. And we would be seeing much more in the urban, so-called educated, corporate landscape that we are in.
Thank you, Priya. Shoma, would you?
Yeah, sure. So I think I want to focus on the resolution, as you said, Sujata, that, perhaps once we are torn between, what we want to do more, whether we want to listen to our families and sort of take care of the household responsibilities or go back to work, I think it also gives us that edge because at least in certain sectors, for example, in the banking sector or where we work, now we have 95% of our people actually working from home. And it gives us an opportunity now to actually go and negotiate at home and say, I can work from home so I can continue to work and I can continue to still sort of support my family. And I think that's how we should negotiate back at home, to be able to sort of, stay in the job, not really have to drop out just because we have to take time off to take care of our family or go on maternity leave. And hopefully this will be the sort of upside or the bright side of what comes out of post-COVID-19.
We're sort of running, I think good on time. We've got about 5 minutes more. So I wouldn't mind if somebody else from, we've got so many participants, if somebody else would like to come in and, make a comment or ask a question, maybe about 2 minutes.
I have a question. I'm not exactly a question. I have a comment. I'm Kasturi from Intury Consulting.
Yes. Hi, Kasturi.
Hi. Yeah. One thing that actually didn't get mentioned, and I think Rakhi mentioned it briefly during her during the speech she made, that most women, people who have younger kids, have the kids attending online classes in the morning during the daytime. And I have a 5-year-old. And thankfully, I work for an organization where people actually work around my daughter's online class schedule because she can't handle the online class on her own. I have to be there sitting with her. And I think a lot of women are also facing the same challenge while they have to attend webinars, office calls, and things like that, as well as handling kids who are attending online classes. And the schools invariably expect that it's the mother who is going to take care of it. And I think that's also something, an attitude that we could think of changing. And yeah, another thing about work from home is, I mean, I have worked for an organization previously where work from home was never like a problem. I mean, we didn't even have to ask a permission for the same. And I thought my productivity was really, really good because I could work at my own pace. And I think that needs to be something which needs to be looked into after we go back to work. And another thing is, we talk about men participating in household work. I think all of us have the responsibility of bringing up our next generation of men in that same way. Like, as I'm on the webinar here and my husband is also in another office call, my 20-year-old son is serving lunch to the rest of the family. So I think that's what we should look after, train our sons to be the next generation men who participate in work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kasturi. You raised a very important point about work from home, but that's where, I feel I hear a lot of women, having conversations where that is also, while you have your own flexibility and schedules to work from home, I think from the organization's point of view also, that needs to be looked at. It's not like you have to have those dark phases where you're not contactable and you have to have your own space and time at home. Those are things which also need to be discussed, I think. That's an important point going forward. Is there anybody else who would like to say something?
Want to make one point here. While we had work from home, it was always specified that no client meetings can be missed. No client calls should not be attended, and all the deliverables should be on time.
Right.
I think we women can maintain that, and we should not cause anyone else to sit back in office because we could not do the work in our office hours.
Sure,
as long
sure,
as we can
absolutely.
pay attention to that, I think work from home should not be a problem.
Absolutely. Right. So I think we're sort of heading towards that 1:30 where we need to sort of wrap up. And I'll take this moment to conclude this session. I think it's been a very, very interactive and informative and a very vibrant session. I first and foremost would like to say a heartfelt thank you to Soumya Kapoor Mehta and Monideepa Banerjee for your valuable time, for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. I definitely, my deepest appreciation for our extended panel, all of whom you've come together, you've shared such brilliant points. So thank you to each of you. To our awesome participants and audience who've represented industry and all different sectors. You've made it equally interesting and exciting. Last but not least, CII, without whom this would not have happened. And of course, our wonderful IWN East, chaired by Shucharita and strongly supported by Anuradha. And for all of you for putting it so painstakingly together and making it happen. So thank you once again, everyone, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, team, and the IWN core group, of course, so who are always there with us. Thank you, and I hope we do meet for a real live conference or a seminar or a workshop. So it will be wonderful to see these familiar faces, which I'm now seeing. It will be great to see all of you again in person. But meanwhile, stay safe, stay well, stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Bye.